Hi, in part 1 of this series, Nebula read to us some scripture verses. Near the end, she was reading a section of Psalm 22, when we ran out of time. Why don't you reread that section for us, and we will pick up where we left off.
Yes, of course. I am always happy to read from scripture. At Psalm 22, verses 12 through 18 it says, "Many bulls have surrounded me, strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. They open wide their mouth at me, as a ravening and a roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaws, and you have laid me in the dust of death. For the dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encircled me, they pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me, they divide my garments among them, and for my clothing, they cast lots."
So, in that passage, we see this person surrounded by strong aggressive men, snarling at him, while he is poured out like water, his strength waning, his bones being pulled apart, heart is under stress, thirsting, and recognizing that he is about to die. While in this condition, the evil surround him, having pierced his hands and feet. He can sense each of his bones in the agony, and while people are gawking at him, those at his feet gamble and divide his clothes.
That is really amazing, how detailed it is, hanging on a cross, surrounded by gawking people, bones pulled apart, the hands and feet pierced with nails, and men gambling for and dividing his clothes. This is either a very remarkable messianic prophecy or an unbelievable coincidence. Of course, I am joking about the coincidence. I don't think a rational person could conclude that.
Rational, no, but someone desperate not to believe might try to rationalize it just that way. However, when you consider that there are over 300 Old Testament prophecies like these about the life of Jesus, it is virtually impossible to avoid the conclusion that Jesus is the Messiah.
It is little wonder then that Jesus would quote from this passage.
Indeed. I would like to think that if I were a Jew at that time, having witnessed this spectacle, that when I read this passage in the Psalm, I would have said, "Oh my God, I witnessed this that day. I was there, the words of this Psalm were fulfilled in my presence." I would hope that I would have fallen to my knees and begged for mercy. I suspect that many did. I also suspect that as Matthew's Gospel was spread, that there would be those who read it, who may also have been there that day, or been close to the events, who also would have had this reaction. I am confident that those who were permitted to realize the significance would also have sought God's forgiveness, and received it, as millions have through the centuries since.
This is fascinating. What else is there?
Well, one from that time would have seen something else in that psalm. Why don't you read for us verses 27 to 31?
"All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will worship before you. For the kingdom is the Lord's and he rules over the nations. All the prosperous of the earth will eat and worship, all those who go down to the dust will bow before him, even he who cannot keep his soul alive. Posterity will serve him, it will be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They will come and will declare his righteousness to a people who will be born, that he has performed it." Remarkable. So in that psalm, we not only see the prediction of the crucifixion of the Messiah, but we see that the result of it would be the spreading of the gospel to the nations, the prediction that the church, that is to say that the future believers, who are Gentiles, will turn from their pagan gods to the one true God.
Of course, this turning to the Lord was accomplished because the Messiah died for all men, and the faithfulness of Jesus' apostles in spreading the good news led to the adoption of the Gentiles into the family of God, making the promise to Abraham come to fullness. Why don't you read Genesis 28 verse 14 for the people, so they know what we are talking about?
Sure, give me a moment to turn there. Excuse me, I was up to all hours on worthy Christian forums. Okay, here it is. God is speaking to Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, and says, Your descendants shall also be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you, and in your descendants, shall all the families of the earth be blessed.
It is my belief that Jesus quoted this psalm not in any doubt about his Father's faithfulness, but was indeed making a powerful statement. It is as though he were saying, "Look to the Scriptures, you will see this, and you will know I am he." We can look today and see this is clearly a prophecy and a fulfillment. I believe that this was a sign to believers, to the faithful, that they should be reassured that the Son of Man was supposed to die, something they were not expecting to happen to the Messiah when he came. Otherwise, when Jesus died, they might doubt and look for another as Messiah. This was not a sign to convince the unbelievers. They were to get a different sign, one more powerful than this one.
And I know what that is.
I know you do, but maybe someone watching this video doesn't. So, I shall explain it for them. In Luke 23, verse 46, we saw Jesus breathe his last. Those close to Jesus were in despair, devastated, disillusioned. Although Jesus told them repeatedly that he would be soon dying, it was not enough. They were ready to give up and try to put this all behind them as if it was only a terrible nightmare. They didn't understand some things that Jesus told them. So, they hurriedly put Jesus in a tomb and went away in their grief. For mere men, the grave appears to be the end. Jesus was no mere man. Remember I told you that the unbelievers would get a more powerful sign? In Matthew 12 verse 39 through 42 we read, "An evil and adulterous generation craves for a sign, and yet no sign shall be given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall stand up with this generation at the judgment, and shall condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south shall rise up with this generation at the judgment and shall condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here."
So Jesus has here predicted his death, burial and resurrection, and stated that this is the only sign he would give those included in the evil generation.
That is right. We tend to think of a generation as a group of people born at approximately the same time. In Greek, the language that the New Testament was written in, it can mean that, or the age in which a generation lives, or a race of people. I have no idea which is implied here. The sign given to this generation would be Jesus' resurrection after being in the earth 3 days. What Jesus went on to say, I think is very powerful, that Nineveh would stand up with this generation. The Greek word here for stand up is anastazontai, from the same root word that we understand as resurrection, and when they stand up they will condemn the unbelieving at the judgment, because even they repented at the mere preaching of a prophet, but this generation did not believe, when the Son of God himself was among them fulfilling prophecies and performing miracles.
We are so blessed to have the Bible, with the words and deeds of Jesus, and the opportunity to turn to him.
Yes, you are so right. The resurrection is a powerful idea, and the death, burial and resurrection of Jesus are the heart of the gospel. All people have a common enemy, one that we cannot defeat. That enemy is death. People are born with a survival instinct. What people do not stop to consider is that death is inevitable, and that the answer to the issue of survival is to be able to survive after death. How would one know if that were possible? The only real evidence that would at all be convincing would be for someone to die and return back to life from the dead. They could not die as in having one's heart stop for a few minutes. That is not convincing, but really dead, all life functions gone, cold on a slab kind of dead. If I am going to listen to someone tell me that there is a life after death, I want his source of information to come from someone who has been there. That is authority. Well, we are out of time again for this segment.
I wanted to ask something.
Well, it will have to wait until next time. Goodbye all.
Goodbye.